I feel like I need to do the booktube thing where I hold up the book, but I don't have it, not because I lost it, but because I just listened to the audiobook version. So, behold, the prop. I think Joe Abercrombie himself actually put it more succinctly and more accurately when he said, "Oh my god, was that a jump cut in the middle of the book review? Holy shit." To continue whatever the fuck it was I was saying, consulting what everyone knows is only the most reliable source of information on any book, Goodreads. I didn't want to do just a review of the Goodreads summary, but this is really interesting to me, okay? Because that's the only lip service that Kwai gets the entire summary. He's just the pathetic servant to the bald man. Alright, listen, okay? The website is up, the blog post is live, seasonal depression has yet to take effect. We are at the apex of human experience, and therefore, due to the karmic laws of nature, we need to have some element of depression to balance this out. And I know of no better source than the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, with such outstanding, fantastic role models as Kwai? Kwai has okay studying skills. To be fair, Kwai probably studies harder and is more intelligent than most people in our education system. He's not quite as good as Bias would want him to be, but yet the work that he does is probably far more than what would get you through any level of education here in America. Adi? I like Adi. I don't think she's killed anyone yet in the part of the book that I'm at. Consulting what everyone knows is only the most reliable source of information on any book, Goodreads. The Blade itself, First Law, number 1, by Joe Abercrombie. Logan Ninefingers, infamous barbarian, because that's what they're called, has finally run out of luck. Caught in one feud too many, he's on the verge of becoming a dead barbarian, leaving nothing behind him but bad songs. Wait, hold on. Is this canon? I actually don't know because I've only ever listened to the audiobook. I don't think I've ever owned a physical copy. Is this what's on the back of the book? Did Joe Abercrombie pen this himself as a synopsis of the series? I really hope this isn't canon. I don't want it to be true. I always envisioned Logan, being the legendary figure that he is amongst the Northmen, to have good songs. Maybe not great songs as in they are accounts of him doing very good deeds, but the songs themselves are pretty great. You could vibe to it. It's a slap, it's a bop, you know? Bad songs, dead friends, and lots of happy enemies. I don't know about lots of happy enemies. And let's be fair here, Logan is hated basically by everyone. In fact, Logan has more enemies than there are people alive in this world, because Logan is basically hated by both the North and the South, and more people have died while hating him than there are people still alive who don't hate him. And that would equate to a lot of happy people, which we know for a fact is not true in the First Law universe, not even slightly. It seems like everyone's pretty sad and depressed in the First Law trilogy. Also, I don't think anyone in the series, except for maybe those in England and the South, would call them barbarians. This is clearly a very ethnocentrically written summary. Because look at the framing here, okay? We have to bring out our political analysis. This is obviously written by a Union scribe, because they're characterizing the songs of Logan Ninefingers as bad, as well as the people that would be enjoying them as barbarians. Okay, if this is canon, or even if it's not, it still brings a lot of interesting questions into why this would be written in the way that it is. Nobleman Captain Giselle Dan Luthar, dashing officer, a paragon of selfishness, has nothing more dangerous in mind than fleecing? That's a word? Okay. Oh my god. Need to zoom in. I can't even read, and this is a booktube channel. Nobleman Captain Giselle Dan Luthar, dashing officer, a paragon of selfishness, has nothing more dangerous in mind than fleecing his friends at cards and dreaming of glory in the fencing circle. But war is brewing, and on the battlefields of the frozen north, they fight alongside bloodier rules. Okay, so it does occur to me now that I neglected completely in the original recording of this video to comment on Giselle's paragraph in this summary, and that's because, honestly, I don't really think that there's too much to say about it. Giselle, I believe, from his conception as a character, is meant to be, for the most part, pretty boring. And I mean that in the sense that he's not really designed to subvert any of the typical personality traits or aspects of the human condition that one would expect from a character in a literary series. He is, in fact, the absolute opposite of that kind of character. He is meant to be aligned and in tune with the most aspects of the human condition that the vast majority of people will experience, such that we can resonate with his journey. If you're a person that has, lived and gone through struggles and worked towards things without necessarily being very passionate about doing them, losing your sense of purpose, and then come across people in your life who then motivate you to aspire to greater goals and actually struggle to achieve them, then you're probably someone that can relate to the character arc designed by Giselle, and that makes him very engaging to read, but not very interesting to summarize, if that makes sense. For characters such as this, the real intrigue comes from reading through their progression in the narrative and then being able to empathize with their journey. It's not so much that their character premise is so intricate and fascinating that it captures one's imagination from the onset on this very surface level of describing characters and narratives and story arcs. And in this way, he's somewhat of a reader insert blank slate type character, even though I would argue Giselle has a bit more personality and personal autonomy in the books than other blank slate characters. But for example, try to create a compelling character summary of Harry's arc in the first book of Harry Potter. Harry is a blank slate character. He's meant to be someone that people, mostly little children, can empathize with. But if you want to reduce down the things that Harry does in that book to this more myopic, very specific, descriptive level, such that you can put it in a paragraph summary, that would be very difficult to do in an intriguing way. You can say that Harry is this little boy who is mistreated by his family and then discovers that he is a wizard, goes off into the new and fascinating world, meets new friends, and then gets himself involved in all kinds of mischief. And that's true. That objectively happens beat per beat in the story of Harry Potter, but without getting into any of the specific details of the way that world around him shapes and makes things interesting, it's hard to create any of the kind of intrigue or the appeal of Harry or that story in general without going into spoilers or immense amounts of depth, if that makes sense. And I think Giselle runs into the same kind of problem. So for that reason, I don't really count against this summary the fact that Giselle's paragraph isn't really that interesting, even though it is somewhat accurate. Inquisitor Glocta, cripple turned torturer, would like nothing better than to see Giselle come home in a box, but then Glocta hates everyone. I mean, I think Glocta has some kind of affection for Practical Severard, probably also Practical Frost too. I mean, I don't think he would vouch for them or do much of anything for them really, but I don't think he actively holds any level of resentment or hatred towards them in particular. In fact, they're very useful most of the time. He doesn't even suspect them when they know there might be a traitor amongst their midst, which is a little bit strange if he's meant to be this person that has perpetually been corrupted by his time over in the Gurkish internment camps. His latest trail of corpses may lead him right to the rotten heart of the government, if he can stay alive long enough to follow it. I think Joe M. McCrombie himself actually put it more succinctly and more accurately when he said, Glocta doesn't so much just have this burning pit of hatred in his heart for everyone and everything. It's more so that he himself suffers internally so deeply that his concerns or his capacity for compassion for others has diminished so much that he just doesn't give a fuck. Which is fair enough. I mean, if you're a cripple, having been tortured and disfigured such to the point where you're not just socially ostracized, but you're in constant physical pain ranging from mildly tolerable to completely unbearable on a daily basis without being able to enjoy any of the creature comforts that we would like to have as people, that's already pretty bad. But on top of that, minor spoilers, I guess, for Glocta's backstory, he had so much taken away from him, and the fact that he can compare and contrast his lifestyle after the Gurkish torturer Inquisition, going back to the same places he was before, to only then live out this miserable existence, doing bidding for other people whom he might be a superior over, has to be awful. Enter the wizard, Baez. A bald old man that's the key piece of characterization that you need to give to Baez. Make sure the audience knows that he's bald. Not the beard, not his aura of mystery and terrible power behind a thinly veiled, mask of pleasantries. Just the fact that he is bald, that's the important thing. A terrible temper and a pathetic assistant. That's the only lip service that Kwai gets the entire summary. He's just the pathetic servant to the bald man. I like that. He could be the first of the Magi. He could be a spectacular fraud. But whoever he is, he's about to make the lives of Logan, Giselle, and Glocta a whole lot more difficult. Murderous conspiracies rise to the surface, old scores are ready to be settled, and the line between hero and villain is sharp enough to draw blood. I almost really like this play on words up here. I didn't want to do just a review of the Goodreads summary, but this is really interesting to me, okay? Because look, this could be a very clever play on words. Infamous barbarian, on the verge of becoming a dead barbarian. That's a nice sentence. But because you interrupted with this, infamous barbarian has finally run out of luck, caught in one feud too many. He's on the verge of becoming a dead barbarian. and then you use a dash. Like this, I feel like should be a pause or an ellipses for emphasis, but this is like a continuation in the same breath. You would continue on saying, leaving nothing behind him but bad songs, dead friends, and a lot of happy enemies. I rate this summary a 3 out of 5 stars. I'll give it 2.5 just because Pharaoh wasn't even mentioned. Oh, and I feel like they mischaracterized Glokta. Glokta isn't even that complex of a character. Okay, so I'm just going to interject here and utilize some of my supreme and unquestionable editor's privilege to obstruct the video in only the most intrusive way possible by simply reaffirming that I do exactly stand by the statement that I just made. So I want to comment on that a little bit further, because Glokta, while not being a very complex character, does not make him a bad character. Being complex is not one and the same with being great. We learn very quickly throughout this story that Glokta, for being a objectively terrible person by any metric of morality that you want to use, is still very likable. Or at least, if not likable, then he's very interesting to see play about this world. The engine of intrigue for a character like Glokta doesn't come from the fact that they have incredible nuances in the way that they view the world or change throughout the story or interact with it. It's just that who they are from the onset and who they continue to be is already inherently so interesting to us that it doesn't really matter what they do or what they become in the future. And take, for example, a character like Gandalf. Gandalf isn't really that deep of a character either. He doesn't have much of a character arc at all. We don't know too much about him as a person, and his outlook on the world, while we presume it is informed by some wealth of knowledge, isn't exactly very nuanced or commented on in depth throughout the narrative of the story. You don't need to understand the intricacies of Gandalf's worldview and his thought processes to like him as a character and to appreciate him in the parts of the stories that he's at. Glokta, for the way that he is portrayed in the novel, is very similarly not a character that really needs all that much depth in order to make it a very interesting reading experience. The premise of the character can be communicated in a very compelling way in very few words. He isn't that complex to describe, and for that reason, I think, as opposed to Giselle, Glokta has much higher potential to be given maybe a more accurate, maybe a more compelling summary. For what they did, it was probably very good. I'm not mad at it by any means. In this number of words, you can probably capture what is like the main conflict or the main motivations of this character and his plot line, while also like accurately representing him as a person. Okay, I feel like I need to do the booktube thing where I hold up the book, but I don't have it. Not because I lost it, but because I just listened to the audiobook version. So, behold, the prop. So when I first started reading First Law, okay, I first thought that this is very interesting. Mostly, I was just confused because I think I started on like chapter 8 on accident, and I was very curious as to who the dog man was, because this is a fantasy novel, and in fantasy novels, you don't always know whether the characters, if they're called dogmen, are literal anthropomorphic dogs, or if it's just a man with some characteristic features of dogs. And sometimes it is hard to tell. Very confusing stuff. But eventually, I did find chapter 1, and I was pleasantly surprised, because Logan is a great character. I feel like it takes you a little bit to understand how great of a character he is, and that's usually because it's in contrast to the way the narrative voice switches, going from point of view to point of view. Oh my god, was that a jump cut in the middle of the book review? Holy shit. Well, I had to go do things. Sorry guys, life happens, okay? But to continue whatever the fuck it was I was saying, beginning this book, just viewing the first chapter from Logan's point of view, you might initially assume, well, he's just writing Logan from the perspective of his narrative voice. So the author themselves is inserting the personality and the way that Logan views the world from the way that the author views the world. By going on to the next point of view character, which I believe is Glokta, immediately from that point onward. And from that, you're able to appreciate all the nuances and all of the interesting ways in which Logan is a different character from Glokta, and even Glokta is a different character from Logan, and the narrative voice of Joe Abercrombie himself, which is very impressive. It's definitely by far one of the best iterations of character writing and narrative voice that I've seen in any work of fiction or otherwise. And I don't say that lightly, because I've read many books. I've read many highly acclaimed books as well, in the same type of genre, from authors that are also supposed to be great at writing characters, and great they are. But none of them have rivaled Joe Abercrombie in this one aspect of his craft. I don't think that there's a better person out there. I don't think there ever has been. And it might just be subject to my own personal biases, but it's almost as though he put all of his skill points as an author, or at least all of the ones that he could voluntarily control, into his character writing. And while that does diminish some other aspects of his story, such as many of his critics will point out in his plots, but I think it all plays towards his advantage, because there's no one else beating him at his own game. So say one thing for Joe Abercrombie. Say that he is fantastic at writing characters, and for that reason, there's so much more that can be said about the First Law trilogy and about his work in general as an author. And since I am rereading through The Blade itself and will be going through the remainder of that series, there will no doubt be many more brilliant insights that all of you will be at the edge of your seats waiting for in great anticipation. However, friends, we must be realistic about these things, because I do not expect you to actually be receiving them at any point in the near future. So till then, you can go read a book or something, or my blog. My blog is live. That's judgingbeyondthecover.godaddysites.com. Read it.